It is my current goal to beat the game of Pokemon Yellow every single week in a solo challenge using all 151 Pokedex entries for this game. And today we are taking a look at the Pokemon of Machop. Machop is a base level Pokemon, and if you've been here before, you'll know that that can sometimes be quite a struggle. If nothing else, it's just simply the fact that the main stats of this Pokemon are not that powerful. So it is going to have some struggle to keep up with the fully evolved Pokemon that you come across, especially in the late game. However, Machop does have some interesting type coverage within this game, and it will be interesting to see if we can kind of get anything going with that. Now, the big thing here for Machop, there's some interesting things in between Generation 1 and Generation 2. First and foremost, we start with just the move Karate Chop, and although we do defeat the Eevee, you will notice that this move in Generation 1 only is a normal type move. So that is pretty interesting, and it's one of those things where I feel like Karate Chop could be really significantly helpful in this run if it was a fighting type move. Now, one of the big things too for this move is that it has a really high chance of critical hits, which is good because we don't really have many opportunities for this Pokemon in terms of boosting its stats, so we are going to need to take advantage of critical hits, because in this game, at least in Generation 1, obviously, the critical hit situation is that it skips over any of your stats. So it doesn't matter if you boost it, reduce it, whatever, critical hit will be a critical hit. And that's one of the things that we're going to need to take advantage of, since we won't be able to boost anything and make ourselves stronger overall. And we won't be able to withstand more things, so we're going to need to be able to move quickly here. Now, with Karate Chop, again, it does have a high crit chance. Later on at level 20, we will learn the move of Low Kick. In future generations, that is a move that does more damage based on the weight of the Pokemon, but in Generation 1, that is not the case. In fact, in Generation 1 and 2, it is just simply a move that has 50 power, 90% accuracy. However, it does have a 30% chance at causing the target to flinch. So that will be another huge thing for us throughout this run. We're going to need to flinch some people as we go, so that way they can't attack and take us out in one hit, when we're going to need to probably 2 to 3 hit most of our opponents. Now, there are obviously some other normal type moves that we can learn here, but a lot of them aren't really that interesting to me. I don't think that we really want to take care of like Takedown or Double Edge just because it will do damage to us. Rage is not a very good move in this generation. I don't use moves like Double Team during these runs. It just sort of feels a little hokey. And I also personally don't use Mimic unless the Pokemon desperately needs it in order to complete the game. Eventually, when I start doing some speed runs, I might change up part of that kind of idea, but for me specifically, I really want to try to avoid using Mimic if possible. Now, weirdly enough, we can learn Fire Blast. Okay, sure. We can also learn Rest, but because we're so weak, I don't think that's really going to be all that helpful. Rock Slide could be pretty important. We can also learn Earthquake and Dig. Those are going to be crucial for the amount of poison type Pokemon, and specifically the ghost type Pokemon, because in this generation we are lucky that the 3 ghost type Pokemon are also part poison, which means that those ground type moves will be super effective. But also ghost type Pokemon are immune to normal and fighting types, and as you can see, almost all of our moves on the right hand side of the screen are fighting and normal type. So we need to be able to move past them if this Pokemon is going to complete the game. So therefore, we will need to have moves like Dig and or Earthquake and Rock Slide, things like that. Fire Blast maybe, but I doubt we will ever see that happen on a Machop run. Either way, now that we've sort of talked about the main overall way that this Pokemon operates and some of the learn set stuff that we're going to have throughout the game, we have now defeated the additional rival, which is good. We need that extra experience points, and we are then going to move on towards Brock. After we have karate chopped our way through a bunch of bug trainers in Viridian Forest, we have made it to that first gym, and we've made pretty quick work of this junior trainer, right? We took very little damage, and that makes me a little hopeful. I feel like with only a normal type move. At level 15, this could be not ideal. I also probably, worst case scenario, could take Blackout Training here against Brock, although that doesn't really feel fully in the spirit of this. This is not a Pokemon that struggles so much that I think I would need to do that. I think I could just do this regularly. Now, seeing Bide first and foremost is not a great sign, and therefore we get that first reset. Okay, so that's not too bad. I feel like as a base level Pokemon and one that does not currently have a super effective move, I feel like we did get pretty far. We got the Onix down to half health. So I think that if we do just a little bit of grinding here in Viridian Forest, we can eventually return in just a few minutes at a couple levels higher, ready to take him on again, which is what we do here now that we are at level 17. That's only about a level and a half up, but I do think that this is going to be good for us. We're not taking a lot of damage in this fight against Geodude. We've taken less than 10 points. Now, of course, it does go for Bide instantly, which never really looks good for us. And the fact that it misses Bind there is pretty crucial. It misses twice, and that gives us the victory. That could have easily have gone the other way. We got very lucky with the low chance of hits for Bind, but in the end, that's all you need. A win is a win, as they say. And then we move right along after that last victory. We go right through Mount Moon. It is pretty good, pretty easy for us. Machop is actually leveling up quite nicely, and we go up against the second rival team. At this point, Karate Chop is still going to be our best bet against pretty much everything, although we do have Low Kick, and I could have used that against the Rattata, but, you know, I just sort of forgot. But obviously, we one-shot both it and the Eevee, and so we can move on to all of Nugget Bridge. After the full entirety of Nugget Bridge and the route up to Bill, we get our SS Ann ticket, then move our way back down to Misty's Gym, where we're going to go for badge number 2. At this point, we have leveled up to level 26, and I feel like, 20 minutes is not super fast, but it's also considerably faster than a lot of the base level Pokemon. One of the big things that I think Machop is going to have is the opposite situation as some of the Pokemon that are, like, let's say the Jigglypuff, right? Jigglypuff had such a long start just because it doesn't have any good moves in the beginning, and then it starts to really take off. Machop, I think, is going to have a pretty fast start, and then we're going to start to see the slowdown. But right now, we're going to try and take advantage as much as possible of that fast start, and we're already at Misty, 21 minutes in with level 27. We're looking pretty good against her team. The only issue is that their special is so high and their defense is pretty decent because of things like Harden and the X defense. So because of this, we do take another reset. We really need to make sure that we are getting as much damage as fast as possible against this Starmie, and Bubble Beam has such a huge critical hit rate that it's kind of scary, I'll be honest. And so we're looking bad, right? We've taken 2 resets, and that's one of those signs of the situation that we have going against us for the special. So we're going to take that note and say, okay, let's not try and just blast through. We're going to move on, and we're going to take up the move Dig from this Rocket Thief that is just outside of the house that is on your way to Vermilion City. Now, once we pick up the move Dig, we are going to put it on the moveset right now. I think that that's going to be the better thing for us to have over Earthquake A, just because it means we have a move immediately to use. Plus, it also means that we can get out of places and go back to Pokemon centers faster. But I think in the long run, the big thing is after leveling up one more time, I think this move is going to be the last thing that we need in order to defeat Misty. It's currently the hardest hitting move that we have, which is good because, again, we do not have a very good special while they do. But even though they can use moves like X Defend and everything like that and Harden, by using Dig, we are skipping out on a lot of the turns in which they are attacking. We survive with no critical hits against us, and therefore we have our second badge. After that second badge, we're going to go to one of my favorite areas for music, which is the SS Ann, and we are going to stop by for one of my favorite moves, Body Slam. It's really just one of my favorite moves because it is very much a utility role, right? Now, typically I stay away from Mimic because it is a haha gimmick, But to me, Body Slam is just something that I typically see as something that fills out a learn set, especially one that might struggle in either the early game or even in this sort of case. I just need something that does some damage kind of later in the game even. And that's just one of the things that we have to pick up. But Body Slam isn't necessarily a game changer or a pacing changer, but Mimic definitely is. So that's the reasoning behind the different ideas behind what I'll use. Now, we've now made it 30 minutes in to the Rival 3 fight. We still only have 3 resets, and I'm feeling pretty good about that. Kind of forgot for a split second that Karate Chop is not a fighting type move. I got a little confused as to why that did not one-shot him. Then I remembered. And I don't know about you, but sometimes I get a little confused going back and forth between different generations. Sometimes that really throws me for a loop. Now, what does not throw me for a loop, however, is Lieutenant Surge. We are going up against this guy this time at level 33. We are only 5 levels above him, and he does outspeed us. However, Thunderbolt does not critical hit, and therefore Dig is enough to take him out in 1 hit, and we are on our way to the next gym. Now, Erica's gym is a really interesting one because most of the time it's a great place for us to sort of level grind a little bit. Not a lot of Pokemon struggle in this gym. Usually a move like Body Slam is enough to take out most of these Pokemon if there's not already a move on the Pokemon's learn set that is super effective against the Pokemon here. And it's one of those things where you kind of have to keep an eye on a lot of this, right? Most of the Pokemon here are also part poison, which is another thing very similar to the ghost types. We can use Dig in a lot of these situations against some of the stronger Pokemon. But, you know, one of the big things they have to remember is that there are 2 Pokemon, well, 3 Pokemon total in this game that do not have the poison secondary type. One of those Pokemon is the Execute line. So Execute and Executor are both going to be Pokemon that, you know, have a secondary typing of Psychic, which is pretty dangerous for Machop, right? And then you have Tangela, which is just a mono grass type. Now, one of the other things that we struggle with here in this sort of situation in this gym is the fact that, you know, if we're not defeating the Pokemon instantly, we run a really high risk of getting either paralyzed or put to sleep, both of which can be pretty detrimental, especially to a base level Pokemon. It's going to be a real problem, as you saw in that one fight against that one Gloom. And, you know, one of the big problems I also faced here was I forgot to fully heal my Pokemon going into this fight. So this is most likely going to be a reset just because I don't have anything that's really great against Tangela, and it has the ability to just sort of heal on me, and I can't really do anything to fight against it. So there is a reset there. This time we will remember to use a Ether. We're going to get the move back for Body Slam. Body Slam should be very helpful, like I mentioned earlier, against this Pokemon, Tangela. And even though it's reducing my speed, which is a bad thing, especially again, like if it wants to wrap me to death, it really could. And I get paralyzed there, which makes me even slower. But luckily, I'm not getting hit by anything that's too powerful. And so as long as I don't get paralyzed while I'm digging, we should be, yeah, the paralyzed there and not being able to get a move off is going to also end with another reset. And that's totally okay. One of the big things that you have to do a lot of the times in these, especially these base level Pokemon runs, is a little bit of just sort of throwing yourself at the wall a little bit. You just have to kind of keep going. There's a little bit of RNG that kind of happens within these scenarios. As you can see right here, as we do not get our speed cut in 2 different ways, and so therefore we get to go in a quick fashion and get a dig off, and that takes out the rest of her team. Tangela being the hardest thing in the proper run, effectively. And then we move on to the Team Rocket secret base here in the game corner. We're going to fight through everyone here. This is one of those things where we're starting to struggle with getting our level higher. And that's going to be a real problem as we start approaching more and more Psychic type Pokemon. That's the biggest struggle that we're going to have in this game. Really, at the end of the day, flying types aren't going to be that much of an issue. The only flying type that I think will probably really struggle against is Aerodactyl, but that's way later in the game. So for right now, we don't really need to worry about that. At this point, Giovanni is pretty easy. All of his Pokemon are weak to me for now. And so we can beat him for this first time, get the Self Scope, and then get the heck out of there. I thought there was going to be a way to rhyme self there, and there was nothing. Get myself out of there? I don't know. So then, like, get yourself? No? Anyone? Okay, well, we're going up against the rival once again, and the Fearow, not an issue. However, Shelter using a move that continuously attack is pretty bad just because it's a lot of chip damage. Now we're going up against the Vulpix. Vulpix is one of those Pokemon where thought about what would one-shot it. Dig definitely is the move. Body Slam will be pretty good for Sandshrew. Going to be one of the last times that that'll be helpful. And then, of course, a fighting type move will take out the Eevee. That's the last time that it will be a normal type, so that'll be the last time that that Pokemon is easy. Once we are done with the Pokemon Tower and we have moved through, we have made our way to Saffron City, and speaking of Sylph, we are at Sylph Co., and we're going to fight a lot of the trainers here. First up, we have the Machop Candy trainer. This is where you fight the guy on the 10th floor and you can get a Carbos and you can get a rare candy. I'm going to use that Carbos immediately just because we need to boost those stats bad. Then we're going to continue through the floors, and we're not going to fight everybody. Not everyone has a lot of good experience yields, but any of the people that have Pokemon like this, or really all the kind of evolved Pokemon teams, are going to be really helpful in getting some experience boosts up, because Machop is, as predicted, slowing down. We're at level 46, which I know seems pretty high compared to the rest of the Pokemon, but again, because they are evolved and I am not, their stats are getting better, and mine are just sort of, they're there. I mean, obviously my attack is looking great, but everything else is pretty weak comparatively, and so that's pretty bad. Both our speed and our special are in the 60s. Our defense is only in the 70s. Our HP is fine, but, you know, if we're getting hit heavy enough, it doesn't matter how much HP we have, we're going to lose most of it. Now, going up against the Rival 5 team, this is one of those situations where, at this level, I am a firm believer that we could make it through this fight. I think there are some RNG situations in which we could be better and stronger. One of the biggest problems, however, is not getting to the Kadabra with enough health, because once we get to Kadabra, it's going to outspeed us. It doesn't really matter what I do right now. It's going to be faster than us no matter what, right? And so we need to have enough health that we can take one of those confusions. We need to be able to tank it. And while we did on the last run, we ended up with 1 HP. We're getting to this part of the fight still pretty low. Also, missing a move is pretty devastating. Losing to Cloyster is also fairly sad, I feel like, for Machop, as we have one move that is super effective against it. And technically we could have had another one. There is a move on here that we mentioned kind of early game that for whatever reason, even though it's on the right-hand side of the screen, I mean, it's not there right now, but I mean, when I'm not in a fight, it's right there on the right-hand side of the screen for me to remember at all times. And it takes me a while to remember that I could have taught Rock Slide. I think Rock Slide actually could have been maybe better here for the Cloyster. I'm not really sure on that. I mean, at the end of the day, we're getting the stab boost, the same type attack bonus for this move of low kick against the Cloyster, but it feels weird that Cloyster is being a lot of the issue here for Machop. I was definitely expecting more of Kadabra as an issue. So, you know, it's not looking too great. And of course, we also get an attack cut there, which is dreadful. That's the main thing that we have going for us. So you don't really want to see that. So as always, I take a few losses, and when that happens, I always take a step back. There are a few episodes in which I get really stubborn and I just sort of barrel through, convinced I can do it. I was feeling a little less confident on that one. So I decided, let's go to Koga's gym, because maybe with some leveling up and some grinding within his gym and everything like that, maybe we can get our speed up. But unfortunately, Koga is also stronger than me. And it didn't seem like that was going to be an immediate win. So we then backtrack back to Saffron. And now we're going to go up against the Fighting Dojo. And the main thing here is just that, yeah, we're not super effective against anybody here, but we can get some experience and maybe just get the little bit of boost that we need. Because, you know, at the end of the day, sometimes you just have to take whatever you can get your hands on. And actually, at the end of the day as well, one thing that we'll see here is we can get our hands on a Hitmonchan or Hitmonlee. And I know, obviously, we're not using other Pokemon within the fights. And yes, I can give strength to a Pokemon like Squirtle, but technically one of the things that I find helpful sometimes here is having a different HM on a different Pokemon, just because I feel like it's easier for me to instantly find the one that I want, and it just sort of feels like it's all set up in order. I don't know. Maybe you tell me if you feel the same way about your solo challenges. I would love to see if people are like, I go for the minimum possible thing, or if it's like, yeah, I also like to have 1 TM per Pokemon kind of thing. It's just an interesting, different way of looking at things. Now we have leveled up a few more times and we make our way back to Rival 5. I'm now convinced that Rival 5 is going to be necessary to then beat Koga. I actually think Koga is going to be harder than Sabrina. I think in this generation, or not this generation, sorry, in this part of the generation, yellow versus, you know, red and blue, I do think that Koga is actually tougher. And I think it's specific to solo challenges, right? The main reason being that he's just another psychic type user, but he's using Poison Bug, and he's another example of a time where if I just remembered that I could use Rock Slide, that could have potentially been a better resolution for the bug type trainer, Koga, at least in this game. And then also potentially for the Cloyster. Although on this particular time at level 55, it doesn't seem as though I needed Rock Slide for the Cloyster. The Cloyster this time does go down pretty easily, pretty nicely, pretty smoothly, with a little bit of, you know, hot sauce and some cocktail sauce and some lemon juice. Not gonna lie, I kind of want an oyster now. Okay, well, back to the actual magic of the show. We are now taking on the final trio of Team Rocket guys. They've been embarrassed enough. It's a little bit like being the Bills versus really anyone on the AFC East. We kind of sat them down 3 different times and said, all right, you know, you're done. We're good. We've got this one. I'm not sure if I've ever mentioned this before, that I'm a Bills fan. Who knows, maybe you're tuning in, you're like, I don't care about football. Tell me about Giovanni's team. Okay, well, I'll tell you this about Giovanni's team. I've defeated it. Again. Hello! We're done. We can now move on to the next challenge. And the next challenge it will be, because we're now at level 58. Whew. And we're going up against Koga. I don't mean to sound so scared, but it is a little scary. Koga's team is weird because they should be easy and squishy, but sometimes they live a hit and then they get a psychic off, but luckily we get the kill. That was a one shot. We needed that. We were not going to survive another psychic. I don't know what we would have done if that had not been a one and done. But either way, we now at 16 resets have made our way back to Sabrina. Oh, I guess we've never been to Sabrina. To Saffron. Okay, now I realize what I was trying to say. I said that out loud and for a full minute kind of thought, what am I on about? But we are here at Saffron to go up against Sabrina and to get our butts handed to us. Yeah, she's tough. And we kind of knew that going into this, right? We were talking earlier about how Alakazam and Kadabra, especially, they're going to outspeed us. They're going to be a little bit better overall. So I'm going to get quite a few resets here. And I talked earlier about how sometimes I get a little bit stubborn, or, you know, I have a specific way, which is I go up against someone, you know, only a certain amount of times. I actually did a few more resets there before I remembered that I didn't actually have to be stuck there. I thought I was, but I forgot that because I've gone up against Koga, I have access to Surf, and so therefore I could actually bypass gym number 6 for now, and then go to gym number 7 and go up against Blaine. Now, this is pretty tough because, of course, I died to Burn, and Burn is pretty bad, specifically for a Pokemon that is a physical attacker, as the Burn will cut my attack down. So I really need to get through this with no status conditions. Now, luckily, we're also getting to the Arcanine this time with a lot of health, which was needed because Fire Blast was a lot. But Dig, with no Reflex or anything like that on the field, can one-shot Arcanine, and Blaine is done, which then means we can go back to Sabrina. See, that time it was correct. And we can go back to Sabrina. We can have a higher speed and a higher special. The special is still our weakest spot. We're still a little squishy. Luckily, it is blasting through Recover and Reflex. But after a bunch of digs to try and keep ourselves out of the line of fire, we defeat Sabrina. So we're looking pretty good at this point. I think that means that this Machop is ready to take on Giovanni one last time at 1 hour 51 minutes. The unfortunate sort of drop off here near the end game as we get into more Pokemon that we are weak to, but then also, again, our stats really kind of can't keep up ahead of the curve of those evolved Pokemon, as I predicted about, 20 minutes ago or so. And so we're seeing some struggles here. I was thinking Machop could do a slightly better time than this. I was thinking that I could probably come in under 2 hours. And who knows? For all I know, that is probably still a possibility. If we go for a speed run on this, I would love to see what the best run is out there, both with Mimic and without Mimic. I'm not 100% certain that there is any kind of differentiator out there. Like, I don't know if there's any kind of database or listing there that has those two things separated out. But I would love to know what those two times are, just to sort of see what we can get done with Machop. It's one of those things where some Pokemon, again, I've mentioned this before, some Pokemon I go, I feel like I could get maybe competitive with this. And then other Pokemon I go, well, I'll just sort of attempt it. We'll sort of see what happens. And then other Pokemon I never want to look at ever again. Listen, that's the duality of man and of a solo challenge content creator, I would imagine. And I think a lot of that is honestly kind of the, not necessarily metaphor, but the sort of message or the power of the solo challenge, right? There's a lot of things that sometimes you get no resets, right? Sometimes things are easy. Sometimes you just sort of see the path in front of you and it becomes easy to just go and thrive and do. And then sometimes you need a lot of resets. Sometimes you need a lot of time. Sometimes you need a lot of extra help. You need a lot of strategizing. And sometimes you need to walk away and try another thing for a little bit and then come back to it. I think that that's really kind of just how life is. And that's one of the reasons why after a few resets you can defeat Giovanni and then move on to the last rival fight before he becomes a champion. And it just sort of feels right. I feel like, if anything else, this is a thought that I had literally while recording this exact moment. Like, I actually paused what I was recording and thinking about earlier, thought about this for a brief moment and kind of went, yeah, actually, this is something that I want to say because it's actually really relevant to me right now. One of the reasons why I haven't posted in a little bit, and maybe you've seen the post about it, but I actually just moved my life about halfway across the nation. I just moved nearly 2,000 miles, and it was, I'll be honest, it was quite expensive. And, content creation is a thing that I want to do as my main thing. Not just Pokemon. I have a lot of different things that I do. I podcast, I make social videos, I do Let's Plays with a content creation group, I stream. I have a lot of different avenues in which to do this. But, I think a lot of it is kind of like the solo challenge. In order to make this on my own, I have to be able to have all of the move pool that I need. I need to have a lot of different skills. I need to have some coverage, and I need to be able to get through everything and every challenge that is ahead of me. And by doing so, kind of getting out of the metaphor, you can get to a large amount of success, I think, if you really put your heart and your soul into it. Like, I know earlier, getting back into the actual Pokemon discussion, I know earlier I said that I thought I could do this in under 2 hours. Well, at 2 hours, we are at the Elite Four, which means that I'm not necessarily too far off from my idea, right? Sometimes there's a little bit of extra time sink that happens, especially when I had to kind of go back and forth between different cities, try a few different things. That is a major challenge, especially within the first run that you do with a Pokemon. And that's what I always present to you, the viewer. I always show you my first run. I don't take the time to do second and third and fourth runs, and that's because I'm going to save those for my speed runs. But also it's because I want this to be as true to a challenge as possible. I think I don't want to spend too much time over analyzing. I want to just go and see what I can do as a trainer. Like, if this was me in real life, could I just go out there and do it? Because in real life, I'm not going to be able to go all the way back to the beginning, right? So it's the same way here. And therefore, at 2 hours and 2 minutes, I can go through Lorelei and Bruno and make my way to Agatha, who, while she has some moves that are extremely effective against me, I now have a speed ability to go before her. And like I said earlier, the move Dig is really important. All those Pokemon are really poison types in this generation, or sorry, I keep saying generation, which is funny to me. In Yellow versus Red and Blue, right? Koga is really a bug gym leader with the move Psychic. Okay, weird, right? He's not really a poison type. Agatha is a ghost trainer with 3 ghosts, but she also has 2 other Pokemon that are just poison types, and all 5 are poison. So, there's a lot of weird kind of coverage within that way, but it just means that while I was not prepared for Koga, I think that all those Koga fights and all the things that I did before then made it possible for a trainer like Agatha, who's usually such a problem, to then be simple. Now, what is not as simple is Lance. And as you can see, I've definitely sped through these. Lance is pretty difficult. I know that sometimes we talk about Lorelei being a wall, Agatha is definitely frequently a wall, but I do think that Lance is usually, outside of the champion, maybe the second hardest situation for this entire game. If nothing else, Gyarados is such a menace. Aerodactyl is so fast, and Dragonite, if it doesn't miss, hits pretty hard. So you've got some really beefy Mons on this team. The Dragonairs aren't really that scary, but they do have the ability to change your speed using, Paralyze, or, they can hit you with a speed drop from Bubble Beam with some critical hits, with a Hyper Beam, do a lot of damage, maybe freeze you with an Ice Beam. There's a lot of utility on his team, and so it takes a few resets, but you can get through him as well with just a Machop. The scarier Pokemon, surprisingly, even though Fly is so dangerous, you can get there and really kind of kick some butt. I'll be honest. It was a little shocking to me how quickly I got through Lance. But I also think, again, it's one of those things where they are such beefy Mons and a fairly high level. But if you're level 76, I would hope that most Pokemon can eventually make it through there. What you can't make it through is being frozen solid in this game. Yeah, that's an unfortunate truth right there. In Generation 1, one of the biggest problems that you have is that a move like Ice Beam or Aurora Beam or something that will freeze you, you can't then defrost like you can in other generations. Now, if someone hits you with a fire move, yeah, but the problem is you're going up against an ice-type Pokemon, so you're not going to be hit with that. So that becomes an automatic reset, as does, obviously, passing out HP-wise. So we go back, and this is another interesting moment where you'll notice that the counter has stopped. The timer is still moving. There's something wrong with the backdrop here. It keeps showing me Sandslash as being downed, so I am going to have to reset the board in just a moment. It's going to be a little bit before I really catch on to what's happening, but eventually, once we get there, right there, we fix it. We now only have 2 more resets. The timer is still correct, 2 hours, 7 minutes, 55 seconds, and we are almost through this rival. One of the biggest things is, just like earlier, the Alakazam is pretty dangerous, but surprisingly, the Exeggutor doesn't do a lot to us. The biggest thing is we have to be able to get through Cloyster faster, and even though we are typically slower than the Ninetales, it uses a move that then makes us faster, so Dig goes off. We live through a quick attack with 2 health, and we make it as the champion. Machop has done it. Machop, as just a little guy, as just a little dude, has moved effectively heaven and earth and has fought his way to the top. I think that if you come back and you remember Rock Slide earlier, and you figure out the pathing a little bit better, just so you're not going back and forth between a bunch of different cities and towns and everything like that, cut down on some of those resets, I think you could easily drop below the 2-hour marker that you were looking for. And that's me talking to myself, but also a little bit to you, because maybe you can do this better than I can. I, in fact, imagine most people could. This is just fun for me. But you know what's also fun is hearing from you, the dear listeners. If you've made it this far and you've been enjoying it and you haven't already, please give us a subscribe. Every time you like, comment, share, it helps small-time content creators like myself so much. And like I said, I'm trying to make this whole thing of content creation my job. So every little bit helps. Trying to make it to 500 followers on this channel by the end of the year, so you can also help with that. And that's it for this video. So be kind to yourselves, be excellent to one another, and I will see you all next week for another solo challenge in Pokemon Yellow.